I just wanted to give you an update on the state of play when it comes to the BMW. I've had enormous difficulties with getting hold of an ignition switch because BMW no longer make them. And while there are, or seem to be, some aftermarket ones, they're either in huge demand or they've made so few of them that they've sold out. Either way, I haven't had much luck. Now, apart from the mechanic who's also been doing some searching, I've been on a couple of the local Facebook groups with no success. I contacted a friend who's in France who has a 635, so an E24 BMW, and he has contacted some of his circle without success. I messaged a fellow on, and thanks very much to him, messaged a fellow on YouTube who is restoring a similar model, and he made a couple of suggestions, and I followed up on a couple of those, including a German firm and a Dutch firm, neither of which had any stock. But he did put me in touch with a fellow in Australia who is an enthusiast, and he gave me the name of a couple of wreckers, one of which was Peninsula BM in Victoria. Now, they haven't been super responsive, I must say, but they've actually turned up something, and it's second hand. I can't seem to get a new one, but it seems to be exactly right. So we've ordered that, and that'll be on its way. Naturally, being so rare, that's not cheap. $300 or $400 or something or other, I think, for a second-hand switch. But when you don't have any other options, you kind of just have to pay the price, don't you? Anyway, it's on its way, and we'll soon know whether it's going to do the job. Now, I'd spoken with the mechanic, in fact, only today, and he said that he was kind of at the point where he was just about ready to rebuild the old switch, but that would have been very difficult given that there's a bunch of spring-loaded contacts in there, and who knows whether all the parts are there when it kind of flew apart, and or whether they're in fact even serviceable, because of course they're probably just sitting on the floor, and who knows how dirty they are, or whatever it was that was holding them in is still actually in place, if you know what I mean. Because, you know, it's a bit like a jack in the box. You know, when you take the lid off, jack springs out, and I think that it's the same with a lot of these spring-loaded contacts. It's a bit like brushes in an old-style generator. You know, when you pull the armature out, the brushes pop in, and you can't get the armature back in again. Anyway, let's see how we go. We've ordered this switch, and if it works, we might have that BMW back before too much longer. And then the mechanic is also going to do a check over for roadworthy, so maybe soon we'll have that on the road. When I say soon, I mean within weeks rather than days. But that's the state of play. I'll show you a few of those photos, by the way, of the existing one and the replacement one, so you can compare them side by side. just heading back from Bunnings and wanted to give you an update on the BMW. Now, I'm not certain exactly what I told you in the last video, but it went off to a local technician who was going to replace the ignition switch because the switch disintegrated. I'm pretty sure that you knew about that. So when he ordered one, he found that it was too small for the housing, so that it just spun within the housing rather than actuated, if you know what I mean. And that had been for, from memory, I think a 630 BMW, because the one for the E12 520 was no longer available, but that was supposedly a replacement. Turns out, though, it's not really, without probably some modification. And having more cables than it should have, plus the issue of positioning, really made it unviable. By positioning, I mean that when you turn the key to a particular position, you know, let's say on and then start, that didn't coincide with the positions on the switch. So in other words, turning it to start might really have only got you accessories, for example. So we hunted around and discovered, in fact, that with the discontinuation of them by BMW, that they'd pretty well become about as common as hen's teeth. So we scoured the planet pretty well, trying, I think, Holland, Great Britain, France, Germany, and the USA, and no one had any new stock. Now, it's possible that we've kind of fallen into a crack between, you know, let's say an aftermarket provider making some, and that had we tried at some other time, we might have been lucky. But as it happened, there just wasn't anything available. Now, I did track down one. Finally, it took a long time, a couple of months, at a wrecker's who specialise in wrecking BMWs in Victoria, and it's called Peninsula BM. They had one, now second-hand obviously, because it's come out of an existing car, and the photos, they said, indicated that it had some wiring modification, but I'm not exactly sure whether that was a busted wire that had been repaired, or in fact the switch had come out of something else. But whatever, the dimensions were correct. So in other words, when it went in, it wouldn't spin around by being too small a diameter. So we ordered it, and it was mighty expensive, and I suppose that's because they recognise the value of it, because there's not much supply. And so we ordered it, and it fits in perfectly. And then we encountered another problem, and that was that there's like a mating bar that runs between the ignition switch, the key barrel, and the ignition switch. So when you turn the key, that mating bar fits into a slot on the ignition switch and rotates the ignition switch to the correct position. But the bar on the ignition barrel had either been damaged or broken, and so it wouldn't turn it fully or completely. So it would turn it on, and then it would turn it to accessory, but it wouldn't crank. But if you put a screwdriver into the switch and turned it, it would crank. So in other words, the switch worked fine, but the mating bar just wasn't making a full activating connection, if you follow what I'm talking about. So we then ordered the...
In 600 meters, turn right onto Stockley Road.
Oh, there we go. There's... I'm just heading back from Bunnings, and I've set the navigation simply because the road when I'd come out here was closed. Yeah,
turn right onto Stockley Road.
And I didn't know whether it had reopened, so I'm just letting the sat-nav do the work for me, because I don't want to come across a huge traffic jam only to find that there's a major detour. Anyway, back to where I was. So we ordered the ignition barrel, so the part with the key, even though it may mean that we have a different key for the door than we have for starting the car. That's not a big deal. We'll work it out, even if we have to get some barrels changed or something to match them. And that's been installed and it works.
Continue for 6 kilometers.
So we're at the point now where the car will start. So the technician, who is a young fella, but he's a very enthusiastic with the performance cars. So he's volunteered to see if he can tune the carburetors, because it's got dual Webers. And these are notoriously difficult to tune, you know, given that it's 2 4-barrel side draft Webers, and so in essence you've got 4 carburetors for 4 cylinders, so matching them is important. Otherwise you'll get rough running, you know, with one cylinder running rich and another running lean, for example. And the differences that you might get in combustion and performance from the individual cylinders. So he's volunteered to give it a shot, so let's see how well he goes. And at the same time, he's going to check it over for a roadworthy, so that if there's anything that needs doing to get it on the road, we can do that at the same time. So all going well. Sometime in the next few days we should be able to get it back, hopefully with a roadworthy, or otherwise a list of things that we need to do in order to get it to roadworthy standard, and hopefully with tuned carburetors. But if not, at least let's get it on the road and let's take it for a spin, and we'll find somebody who can tune carburetors, and we'll get it dropped into them and get them to sort it out. But that's the state of play, so I'll have it soon. So looking forward to doing a video of picking it up and taking it for a run if it's ready to be on the road, and I'll talk to you about it again then. Thanks for watching.